Hi guys, this is Andrew from M-Wave, and today I have here Jaya with us, who is our senior technician here at M-Wave, and we're going to talk about how to build our AMD Ryzen silent gaming PC today. And Jaya is he's going to talk about a little bit about the parts that we chose and picked and why we picked them for silent gaming PC. So let's jump into the CPU. So AMD Ryzen just launched, I would say like a week, 2 weeks,
yeah, about a week ago.
What CPU AMD Ryzen we choosing for this build?
Yeah, so we're using the second highest Ryzen CPU. We're using the 1700X.
Yeah.
And hopefully with this aftermarket cooler, we're going to go for an overclock, maybe a later video. You know, leave your comments in the comment section below.
Okay. All right. I noticed that because AMD Ryzen, it's got a new AM4 socket, and a lot of the current CPU coolers in the market doesn't work for it. So how did you fix that?
Yeah, so good friends at Fractal, they sent it through a custom bracket, so we can fit the S24 Kelvin aftermarket cooler.
Yeah.
We also have a compatibility list on our blog, which lists all the current all-in-one solutions that have been updated to fit the new AM4 socket. Also, some motherboards have multiple mounting points.
All right. Okay. So with AMD Ryzen having new AM4 socket, obviously we can't use the old motherboards. So can you talk a little bit about the Aorus motherboard we're using? Because I don't this kind of like a new brand, I guess.
Yeah. So Aorus is the premium gaming line from Gigabyte. This board that we went with is about the middle of the road for them. It's the Gaming 5, but it's fully featured. It has a Sound Blaster X5 sound solution. It has Crossfire X support, which is important because we're running an RX 480, the 8 gig version. And then also it has dual Intel NICs, which is great for gaming, and also file storage, things like that.
Okay. So let's jump back to the our original goal is to try to get a silent gaming PC. I assume you picked the all-in-one CPU cooler because it's more quieter than a fan cooler, I believe.
Yeah, well, it's definitely high performing. So if we are going to go for an overclock at a later stage, it will be quieter than an air cooler solution.
Yeah. Okay. And the other factor is, I guess, this big box here that we have. So can you tell a little bit about why we chose the Fractal Define C?
Yeah, so the Define C is a modern iteration of the Define S. It's significantly smaller, has a few new features such as having a compartment for the power supply and cable management. It's very clean, it's significantly smaller, and it does fit all the components you see in front of you.
Okay, all right, that sounds great. So can you, I guess we just finished up what power supply and RAM we decided we decided to pick.
Yeah, no worries. So we went with the modular power supply from Fractal. Western Digital now creates SSDs. We're going for an M.2 form factor, and then we're also using Corsair LED vintage RAM.
All right, that sounds great. So we got all the parts ready, and I guess we're ready to jump into build, and let's get it started.
Yeah, let's build. Let's do it. Okay, so the first thing you need is a clean workspace. So maybe about a shoulder width worth of desk space. Make sure there's no metal components around everywhere, so you're not at risk of damaging any components or shorting out. So the first thing to do is unbox the motherboard, which is what we have here. Then we are going to unbox the new Ryzen processor, and then we're going to put the CPU into the motherboard socket.
So I noticed AMD, their socket pins and stuff is different to their competitors. So is there anything they should watch out for, when they plug in this CPU and stuff?
It's just as there are indications on the motherboard where to line things up. So there's a little triangle. So as long as you line that up. Oh look, it's an empty box.
Well, That kind of scared me.
That's what
The
what it looked
packaging
like.
looks pretty good.
Yeah. So they spent a lot on packaging. It's a very nice looking box, very empty inside. This is where the money is.
So is that a sticker? Like,
Yeah. So
okay.
a lot of people would put this on their case to show what powers their
Okay.
PC.
Good.
Okay, warranty. Okay, so to mount an AMD CPU, you have to lift this latch first. And then, so that moves this little socket cover back. There's an indicator mark on the actual socket cover with the little triangle symbol. And then on the CPU as well, there's a little gold triangle. So you're just lining up the gold triangle with the triangle that's on the socket. That's it. It's as simple as that. Just make sure you drop it straight down so you don't bend any of the pins. And then once you have it seated the way that you want, you drop the lever down. So I'm just going to line it up so I'm looking directly down at it. Okay, so it easily has dropped down. I can move it left to right to just make sure that it's secure before I press it down, because it'll kind of lock it into place. If I didn't do that properly, that process would actually bend the pins. Okay, so the next step is to install the RAM. So I'm going to unbox this, and then we're going to install it into a dual channel configuration on the motherboard in the DIMM slots here. So again, keep metal away from the motherboard.
So is there any tips that you have installing the RAM so you don't plug it in the wrong way?
Yes, definitely. So the pins here are not symmetrical, they're asymmetrical. And the notches on the motherboard are also asymmetrical. So essentially you're just lining that up. Once you work it out which way, you can just look at the label and then copy any other extra DIMMs in the same way. Okay, so when you have it loosely slotted into the DIMM slot, you want to put pressure on the left-hand side, but directly down, not at an angle. You want to do that on both sides, and you'll hear a click, so the clips should go in just like that. So it wasn't much force for that to happen. And then now I don't have to look at if the pins line up, because I'm just facing the label. That process won't work for other sockets, so this only applies for this particular socket, so the AM4 motherboards. Okay, so that's it. RAM's installed. Now onto the motherboard. So now we're on to our next step. Okay, so now that we have our CPU and RAM installed, we're going to install our aftermarket CPU cooler, but the first step will be removing the stock backplate and installing our custom backplate. So this custom backplate is so we can install the Fractal S24. And if you need to see whether or not your aftermarket CPU cooler is compatible with the Aorus motherboard, you can check our blog post. So I'm going to go ahead and uninstall this stock backplate, which is here. So it is mounted to the motherboard with 4 screws and 2 plastic just reinforcement arms, I guess. So by taking these 4 screws out, I'll be able to remove this backplate at the back, and then we can look at installing our custom backplate. So just be mindful when you remove the screws that you don't let them fall onto the motherboard's PCB. So this will just minimize the risk of any damage that you could that you could cause to the motherboard. If it does happen, it's not necessary. You're not necessarily going to damage the board, but it's highly not recommended. Okay, so this is the stock backplate, and that's what we're taking it off. So notice that it's a metal backplate, but they insulate it. Okay. So now we're on to our next step, which is installing the aftermarket Fractal S24 cooler with the custom bracket. Okay, so now we're on to installing the Fractal S24 onto the Aorus Gaming 5. So this is what the S24 looks like, packaging. Okay. So currently this is the mounting plate for the CPU block that it comes with. It will eventually be updated to this bracket. For all intents and purposes, looks the same. It's just the spacing is slightly different.
That's because AMD used new AM4 sockets.
Correct. So
it's got
this is the new AM4 socket, which has slightly different spacing. Okay. So
what do we do now?
So if you're unsure about how to install the cooler, you should read the manual that it comes with. But for this cooler, definitely read the manual. After you install a few aftermarket coolers, you'll get the general concept. So for this one, so an easy way to work it out is whether or not they give you a backplate. So this is actually not a backplate. This is like a block mounting mechanism. So in this instance, they're wanting you to use the stock backplate, just without the plastic parts that we removed.
So the plastic part is basically replaced by the AM4 custom brackets.
Yeah.
So
this little plastic part, this little notch here, it's used for other type of coolers, commonly air coolers, and it uses like a spring mechanism. So it has like a latch that goes across, and you put it down. But for this, we're using screws directly through onto a backplate, and we're using the stock backplate in this instance. Okay, which is this. So first stage, we'll be putting the backplate back onto the board. It helps if you're working on an even surface. So this box is slightly raised, so it's a bit tricky. There we go. So that way the back plate won't just drop through. We're about to install this is the CPU block, and this is the retention mechanism, the custom one that we have to install. So you slide it into this groove, like that. And then it's reciprocal on the other end. Through the groove. There we go. So now it's pretty unlikely that it'll come off. From here, the next stage will be applying a little bit of thermal paste onto the CPU itself.
So did that thermal paste come with the Fractal CPU cooler?
Yeah, definitely. So most aftermarket coolers will come with their own thermal paste. You can also buy it. There's not a huge performance difference between them, as long as it's applied properly.
So how much are you supposed to put on? That looks very little.
Actually, in my opinion, this amount is a lot, which is more than I would normally put on. The reason why I put a little bit extra is I have seen a few of these chips, they do run a little bit hot. And this CPU cooler, the surface of the CPU block is really quite flat, quite shiny, and really quite big. And also the CPU surface area is really quite big as well. So you need enough material for it to fill in any uneven surfaces between the two. So with a smaller CPU like an Intel Kaby Lake, you'll definitely not need that much. Yes, so currently we're trying to build the retention plate so we can install it to the motherboard. So to do it on this S24, you grab one of these bolts, one of these springs, you put it upside down, makes it slightly easier. Put a washer on top, slide this through one of the 4 bracket holes, like that. Get a nut, go up. So you want to put slightly downward pressure on the bolt itself. This just keeps it flush against the bracket while you screw the nut. Doesn't have to be super tight, just touch tight is enough. And then you would rinse and repeat for the remaining 4, or in this instance, remaining 2.
Just do it without it.
Yep.
Or just fast forward this one.
It might not be important to install the CPU cooler onto the motherboard before putting into this particular case, but generally speaking, it makes it much easier to mount the CPU cooler if it's installed on the motherboard before you put it inside the case. And because I haven't worked inside this case before, just for best practice, we'll just do it this way. So notice how I left the warning plastic on. The reason is I don't want it to be scratching the surface while I'm, possibly mishandling the CPU bracket, put it against metal, maybe it will scratch the surface, but with the plastic we minimize this risk. But make sure that you remove this warning sticker cover before you actually screw in the CPU block over the CPU. Otherwise you're going to have an overheating processor because it's not proper contact. So you must remove this. Okay, so just moving the radiator closer so I have extra tubing length. In this instance, there is writing on the block, so you would have to make a decision aesthetically where you want this writing. It can either be this way or upside down because it's a rectangle shape. So there are your 2 options. So in this instance, I'll have it this way. So when you look at it, it'll look like that. You would also take into consideration where the tubing will come from, all these other things. So if the radiator is mounted, as my understanding, it should be mounted at the front of the case. So it will be coming from this side. You can try to visualize exactly where your tubing run will be. So if I mount it this way, that's where the tubes will come from. If I mount it this way, the tubes will come from the bottom. In this motherboard, there's better clearance from the bottom, so we'll probably do it that way. So it's as simple as lining up the bolts to the mounting bracket. Just use your hand to get a couple in. Just a couple turns just to line it up. You're going to go all the way. When your hand doesn't reach, a screwdriver comes in handy.
Is there a reason using like the screwdriver instead of a power drill?
Yes, definitely, because I want to take my time with this. I don't want to put any pressure onto the motherboard. It just minimizes the risk of damaging things. If I use a power drill, I could shear the screws or the back plate. Okay, so once everything's lined up, I want to, similar to how you install a spare wheel in a car, you want to go to do opposites. This is to reduce any kind of bowing and also to spread the thermal paste evenly. And again, touch tight is enough. No real need to over tighten. Okay, so that's the CPU block now mounted to the motherboard. Okay, so we have the block mounted to the motherboard. We'll need to provide us some power from the motherboard, so we should plug this in to a fan header. So in this instance, we'll be installing to the CPU optional fan header, which is just under the CPU fan header. So there's a little notch in the fan and a tab. There we go. And we can just do basic cable management at the moment. Just tuck the cable in here. And we'll need it up later once we're working on the case. So the next step now is to open up the case, see what we're working with, and try to mount the motherboard and CPU cooler into the case. Okay, so the next step will be us installing our M.2 SSD onto the Aorus Gaming 5 motherboard. It's a quick step just before we install the motherboard into the case. Okay, so there's just one screw on the motherboard that needs to come out. So again, be mindful, no metal to touch the PCB. Therefore, the screwdriver and screw shouldn't be touching the motherboard. So to do this, you line up the pins with the label facing you, put into the slot. You'll have to apply slight pressure towards the slot. You'll feel a bit of a click. Now you'll be able to push it down with the screw that you removed. Insert it back. There we go. And then again, just touch tight is enough. And now you can see the SSD is securely mounted into the M.2 slot. And that's it. So now onto the case. So this is the Fractal Define C. It's a mid-tower ATX case. It's built with silence in mind, so there is sound deadening material. It's quite a minimalistic case. Okay, so we'll be removing the windowed sliding panel, put it into the case box so it doesn't get scratched, and also the backside panel.
Can you just show the
Yep, the sound deadening material.
sound? Okay,
So
so
that's-
that's what it looks like.
So that's the sound deadening material. It adds extra weight to the case and reduces any sound or vibrations caused by the case or any parts inside the case.
Okay.
And just take my word for it, it's definitely much heavier than a normal case side panel. That particular side panel. It also comes with optional magnetic fan filters. I'm assuming it's for this top area. So by default, they have a nice panel here that will help you block out any additional sound. But if you wanted more airflow, you can install this in its place. But because we have such a high performing aftermarket cooler, we probably won't need the additional airflow. So now that we have the case unboxed and the panels off, the objective now is to install the motherboard into the case. So there are a few things that we need to do to prep the case for the motherboard. One is install the motherboard backplate. The easiest way to do this is to find where the sound outs are, have it closest to you, and then just install it. So line it up, line up one corner. I normally start with the bottom corner and try to press the top corner in. So when you can confirm that all four corners are securely in, and there's no gap, then that means the backplate should be installed properly. So that's what it should look like when it's installed. Okay, so we need to find the screws that come in the case. Normally it's installed into a hard drive bay. So that's what this would be. Grab a container so you can keep all the spare screws so they don't go missing. It's especially important if you're not working in a well-lit area, or maybe your table's black and the screws are black, or you're working your carpet. So these types of screws are for hard drives. We don't have any hard drives, so I'll put this inside the motherboard box. We have an M.2, which is what we installed. So no SATA hard drives, is what I meant. These types of screws will be used to install the power supply, so probably keep them separate. This case does come with thin cable ties. And here are the motherboard standoffs. So this will be our starting point.
Why is there like the motherboard standoff?
So the motherboard standoff, so remember all the warnings I kept mentioning, keep metal away from the motherboard. The standoffs is to raise the motherboard away from the metal part of the case. So at every point where these metal standoffs do touch the motherboard, it's at insulated points on the motherboard. So it stops it from short circuiting. So if you don't install these, or you don't install these properly, you're at risk of damaging your motherboard or shorting out the motherboard. So when you do install them, make sure you do it by hand, so you're not using an electric screwdriver to over torque it. Make sure that you install them evenly and at the correct spacings. So this particular motherboard has 9, so it's a normal ATX motherboard or full-size ATX motherboard, not eATX. You can consult the case's manual if you're not sure where to put these, but it's a standard form factor. Okay, so start by installing the case standoffs just with your fingers, just to line it up to make sure that they're perpendicular with the holes. So you don't want them to be angled at all. So we have one done for us here. This is, and it has like a pilot notch as well. That will help you line up the motherboard. So that's a good move on Fractal's end. Just makes it slightly easier. Some cases have these standoffs pre-installed, which would be some feedback for Fractal, because it is much quicker uninstalling these than it is installing them. Okay, so we have the 9 just loosely in there, or just finger tight. There's this little adapter that we will use to tighten these screws, and we'll use this to make sure that they're flush with the case. We will use a normal screwdriver for this. But again, make sure not to over-tighten the screws. An easy way to see whether or not the standoffs are in properly, you can try to put your fingernail under standoff. If there's a big gap, then you've still got some way to go, but you should be able to feel it through the screwdriver. That's also why it's important to use not an electric screwdriver for this part. Okay, so we have our standoffs screwed in, and I'm just doing the finger test, just making sure there's no gap so therefore it's all level. Okay. Okay, so to remove the front fan, you had to slide out the bottom fan filter, removable fan filter, which is quite a good feature of this case. So again, this case is the Define C is aimed at a silent and dust-free case. Then from here, we'll remove the front panel. So you just pull it towards you. It's just held in with these little tabs.
So you just pull it with like strength and it should come off, right?
Yep, as long as keep it parallel to you, pull it towards you, it'll come off. Okay, so now you'll have to remove the front fan filter.
So you're removing the front fan because we're going to put the radiator at the front.
Correct. So this is the front of the case. We want the radiator on the inside at the front. Intaking fresh air. So there's these little tabs. There we go. That's another removable fan filter. Then just 4 screws, electric screwdriver. So for the last screw, you notice I had to push it forward. It's just that the screw would actually come out. That's it. You can keep the screws for something else. And we'll be removing the fan. So cool feature of this case, there's also Velcro tie downs for cable management. But this cable management is actually holding that fan cable in place, so we want to undo that. So that's the fan cable just there. Push that through, pull the fan out, we go free fan. So now we have space to mount the radiator, and along with the fans that we never installed before, but we'll line up the rad first and then the motherboard. So motherboard onto the standoffs, radiator at the front, and we'll line up the rear I/O with the backplate. So now that the case is prepped, we'll be installing the motherboard that we prepared earlier. So you want to angle it slightly and line up the rear I/O with the I/O backplate. And remember that notch that I showed you before? There we go. That's helped us keep the motherboard level, so now it's not swiveling around. Notice how I'm also supporting the weight of the radiator. I don't want to put any strain on the tubing at all while I'm doing this. So now the weight is actually supported by the table, not on the tubing. So now I want to screw the motherboard down. You can use an electric screwdriver for this part if you'd like to.
I just have to be careful because if too much power I could...
Yeah, you have to be very, very super careful. You can do it on a very low setting. But yeah, I'm old school. I just use a normal screwdriver. That's it. So there should be the same number of screws as the standoffs that you put in. So in this instance, in this case, with this motherboard, it was 8. So if you're only installing 6 screws, then you're doing something wrong. Maybe you're missing a standoff. So again, just touch tight is fine. You don't have to over torque it. Okay, so it's a good sign when all the screws that you're using are gone. So it means it must all be installed. So the next step is now installing the radiator to the front of the case. So we can see the tubing and how much length we have to play with. We don't want to be putting this tubing overlapping where the graphics card will go. So we'll want to have the top of the radiator, or where these tubes connect to the radiator, at the top. So we find the correct screws, which are, we're using these screws. These come with the S24. So these are the screws that you use to mount the fans to the radiator, or also the radiator to the case. So we want to support the radiator to the case, so we'll use the short ones. Okay, so this screw from the S24 will be used to mount the radiator to the case. So for this case, there's two sets of rails. One's for 120mm fans, and the other one's for 140mm fans. So you have to use the inner set of rails. So just touch tight, the bottom will drop a little bit. Do the opposite. So you want to lift it up slightly to line it up with the rail. Okay, so honestly the rad won't go anywhere with 2 screws, but 4 screws is a nice precaution. Okay, so the radiator is now secured to the front of the case, and the motherboard is also secured internally to the case.
Alright. So when do we? So now we install the fan for the radiator, or
I like.
that's a bit later.
We could do it now. However, I'd recommend doing the power supply first. So start with the biggest cables and then work towards the smallest cables at the end. So you can hide the smaller cables behind the big cables. If we do it the other way around, it'll get in the way. So the next step will be prepping the case so we can install the power supply. Okay, so now that we have the motherboard installed and the CPU cooler installed, the next step is to power it up with the power supply. So this is the Fractal Design Modular power supply. So these are the modular cables. We'll install what we need into here and put it into there. So the first stage is to remove the bracket for the case, and we want to install this bracket onto our power supply so we can slide it in. So remember the start of the video where I said the 4 screws are for the power supply? This is the bracket that you use the screws for. You'll be installing it onto the rear of this power supply. There's 4 screw mounts here. Okay, so proceed to do that. In some cases you'll want to install your modular power supply cables first, but this case is a lot of cable management room and a lot of access, so there's no need. I mean, up to you. Do it either way. Okay, for this you could use an electric screwdriver. In actual fact, I probably will. Yep. Okay, so now that the bracket's installed, we're going to slide the cables through first. This is why I didn't install the other cables as well. There'll be more cables to feed through. Then you want to slide with the fan facing the bottom of the case. We like to slide it in, and then use the thumb screws. With the bracket mounted to the power supply with the 4 screws, and then the 2 thumb screws securing the bracket to the case. That's your power supply installed into the case. The last thing to do then with the power supply is to add whatever cables you need and connect the power cables to the components inside. So that's what I would call basic cable management. Okay. There are cable management holes. So this is your 24-pin port on your motherboard. That's your 8-pin. And you will have also graphics card power that will need to come out, and the graphics card will sit in the top slot. That is all the power you will need. So it should be 3 cables. So I'll start with the 24-pin. Come out, there's a notch on this side, and then a notch here on the cable. So line it up from the bottom. Make it even, and then press, and you'll feel the notch go down, this little tab, and then so it's secured. Don't ever pull on the cables out, because it's just like individual pins sitting on a plastic housing. So if you need to pull it out, work from the plastic, not from the cables. You can feed the extra cable length back through there if you wanted to, but I'm going to move on to do cable management at the end of the build. So the next thing is the 8-pin.
So you feed it from the top hole instead?
Yeah, that's right. So there's a cable management hole at the top, which is another good feature of this case, of the Fractal Define C. I am so blind. So like the 24-pin, there is a tab. Let's line the tab up. There we go. So you can also do the fingernail test. So where the 2 plastic housings meet, there shouldn't be a gap in between them. So that's flush, so I know it's in. So then the last thing to do is to put the power supply in and run the power supply, PCI Express power to it. Before doing all that, because the graphics cards are in, we have a lot of room. We're going to plug in the front panel USB and front panel connectors. So the front panel is this. So there will be a cable for the front panel audio, there will be a cable for the front reset button, front power button, and front USB 3. So we'll do the USB 3 first. So work with the biggest cables first. So on this board, on the Aorus Gaming 5, there's 2 USB 3.0 headers here. So I'd want to run the USB 3 cable under that 24 pin there. Okay, so there is a notch, this little notch here. Let's line it up. Like that. So line up the bottom, top, and a little bit of force down. You hear it click into place. So again, worry about cable management later. Okay, so this is the front panel audio. It says HD audio on the plastic. It's also has a missing pin, so that's where you're lining it up. Front audio panel for this board. So this is the sound card. So it's the Sound Blaster sound card. It's a pretty nice sound card. That's the front audio header, just there. There is a cable management hole here, but it's really quite tight. You would have had to remove the power supply first to fit it. So we can run it through here and then run it across. But yeah, we'll see. Yeah, it doesn't fit. So we'll run it through. So bring excess cable. Find out where your missing pin is. Line it up. The audio, corner, and then down. And you want to pull the excess cable through and tuck it under the motherboard. It's barely visible. That's why I wasn't so worried about moving the power supply again. Okay, and now you'll have your front panel audios. Okay, so plugging in the front panel connectors now. So this is the cables for the power button, the reset button, and also the LED lights. So the on light and the hard drive activity light. So I'm just trying to feed it through this little cable management hole that they have here. Sorry guys, it's kind of fiddly. So there's one last one here. Okay, so now I can show you in the camera. So they're all labeled, see? Reset SW, power SW, so that's reset and power switches. Switches, you don't have to worry about polarity. So the reset is always on the bottom row for consumer motherboards. And it's always the third pin. Power is always above that, directly above it. Hard drive, so for LEDs you do have to worry about polarity. It is indicated on the motherboard. So all I'm doing now is pulling the excess cable in just to tidy it up slightly. That's it. So if I was right in what I said, it should turn on and it should have the power LED to indicate that it's on. Okay, from here we will install the fans, and then after that graphics card and we're done. Okay, so we're going to install the radiator fans. So the reason why we didn't do it initially is so we had a lot of working space, but we're almost done. Actually, I'm going to fix the cable management on this area first because the fans go here and it'll make it a little bit tight to do that. So I'll just replug this cable, then I'll install this fan.
So how do I know which way to install the fan?
Yep. So the fan frame indicates where the air direction. So if this is looking at you, it means the air is going towards you. If this is going the other way, then it's going away from you. So in this case, because we have a filtered intake at the front, we want to be sucking air from the outside. So in that instance, we will have the fan frame facing the inside of the case. And so that way we'll be intaking air from the outside. So you'll have nice cold air coming through the radiator to cool the CPU.
So the filter is to block dust. So then that way, when you're sucking air from outside, kind of like take less dust.
That's right.
The
yes,
PC.
That's exactly what the filter's for, is to try to remove some dust And as it's removable, you can take it out, clean it, put it back in. Makes it easy maintenance and less dust inside the components, inside the computer. Okay, so this is the fan frame. That means air will come this way. So we want to install the fan up against the rad in this manner. I'm just trying to work out what is the shortest cable length. So this is where the fan headers are. So we want to do it this way. So we'll take one of the these long screws that came with the S24. Just with your finger, screw it in lightly. Just a few times is fine. Fans don't weigh that much and they're all plastic, so it's minimal risk of it damaging any other component. Just be mindful of the screws that you're not dropping them on the motherboard. Okay, so this is another good example why we haven't done cable management yet. This cable's in the way. If I tied it down, it would be double handling to cut the cable tie and reposition the cable just to get a screw in. So I'll be using a screwdriver to get it in all the way to the rad. But essentially I just want to have it mounted so I know that it physically fits. I'll run the cable and then I'll fix up the screws. So we don't want the cables to overlap, so I went under the 24 pin into the fan header. You'll want one of these fans going into the CPU header, or you can use a splitter to run it directly off the CPU fan. But a feature of the Aorus motherboard is it does have onboard fan control, so you can control the speed of the fans. So it really doesn't matter, but you could use like a splitter and then just connect it to the CPU fan header if you just want to monitor these two fans that are on the rad. So in this instance I can use a small bit like this. This makes it easy. Again, touch tight. Don't use an electric screwdriver, you will start to shear the rad. Especially if you want to be changing the fans later on. Possibly to clean out dust or just change the look of your computer. Or a different sound profile. So with this bit I can get in to that hard to reach area. So rinse and repeat with this fan. Again, keeping in mind we want the cable as close as possible to there, just for easy cable management. So I'll run it through the bracket. And exactly the same process. We're about to install the graphics card. This is the RX 480 8GB version, so it's there's a good upgrade path for Crossfire X, which is also supported by the Aorus Gaming 5 motherboard. So to do this, we'll have to remove the PCI brackets. So it's a dual slot card, so we'll be removing this one, then this one here, taking that out, dropping the card in, putting the thumb screws back in, and then running power to it. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward. In this instance, you can use the electric screwdriver. Let's make it nice and easy for you. So angle the bracket out slightly and pull it. Keep this in case if you want to replace it later. The graphics card by default has dust covers over the ports. Just remove them. It makes lining up the back slightly easier. Also, it's pretty unnecessary to have these. As in, if you have dust in these ports, you'll have dust everywhere else in the computer as well. Okay, this is also a cover. Just take this off. And this is the slot that goes into the top PCI Express slot. Well, not the top, but the top 16 slot. Okay, so this is the bracket. So remember, we removed the two white ones. We'll be lining that up where they went before. Start by angling it to get these two tabs into the case, the back of the case itself. So angle it slightly, line it up against the back of the case, then have a quick look, see if the pins line up to the slot. I'm not putting any downward force onto the card at all. In fact, it's just its own weight. Just seeing if it lines up. You can check on the other side. See, the tabs weren't in. I pushed it in. Again, no downward pressure, making the pins line up. No downward pressure at all. Now everything's lined up, I can see. I'll put one finger here, one finger there, just on the PCB, and down, and that's in. You'll notice it's in. There's a little PCI retention clip as well. That would have been down, it comes up, it's now flush. To remove the card, you would have to press that. And that's it. Now we want to put the thumb screws back in to the graphics card's bracket. That's it. Now, this is a modular PCI Express power cable. We'll want to run it from this 8-pin here. So this is different to the CPU's 8-pin. This is a PCI Express 8-pin, and we want to run it from here to our power supply. So we'll run the cable from here through the grommet hole down to the back into the power supply. So it's from the back side. So you hear that click, you do the fingernail test, there's no gap, it's installed properly. For cable management, this particular card, the G1 RX480, comes with these Aorus cable management Velcro straps. So because there's a leftover cable here, we'll want to tie this up. Okay, so I'm going to switch the angle up now, so I can run the cable to the power supply. So if you can, try to keep all the cables coming out from the same area. It will look visually cleaner that way. So essentially from here, everything's done. So this is essentially how the computer will look. What I'll do off camera is just a final touch up of cable management, just making sure that everything is in its right place. And then from there we'll proceed to turn it on, power on the system, and fire it up and see how it goes. Okay.
Okay guys, and that's the complete build thanks to our senior technician JR. He finished the build now, and we're gonna test if it turns on. And would you do the honors?
No problem.
All right, looks like the fan's spinning in front of me right now, and yeah, it looks like it's turning on. I can see some lights, and great work. So if you liked the video, be sure to give us a thumbs up. If you dislike it, to also give us a thumbs down and let us know why. If you have any questions, comment below. And as you can see, this what we have here is an AMD Ryzen gaming PC. We will also be giving it away at the end of this month. So be sure to, I guess, subscribe to our YouTube channel or go to our Facebook page or Twitter, which that's where we'll announce the giveaway at the end of the month. And the full specs of the PC will be in our description below. Okay. And I guess I'll see you guys next time.